Aloha. Hey, fresh fun with Aloha.
Costa is brought to you by FQM Trident Limited, a subsidiary of First Quantum Minerals Limited.
Good evening. It's indeed football season with all the exciting games of the group stages in the World Cup live on Diamond TV. But the national discourse, whether politics or developmental or economic agenda, must still continue. Welcome to Costa on a new time on a Sunday. My name is Costa Mwansa. Now, the role of any opposition political party in a democratic dispensation is not only to provide checks and balances, but to provide alternate solutions to challenges that the country faces. The Patriots for Economic Progress, PEP, boast of only being the only political party since 2016 that has been providing alternate national budgets in relation to a national budget that has been presented. The UPND government did present their 2023 national budget in September, particularly on the 30th, and have proposed a number of measures ranging from taxation to borrowing, as well as how to sort out Zambia's debt and fiscal problem. The Patriots for Economic Progress equally have presented their alternate budget, which they did last week in the month of November. Has this come out too late when over 20 departmental ministries have already been debated on the floor of Parliament? Are some of these proposed measures in a budget being called exploiting our natural resources to pivot Zambia's economic turnaround workable or adoptable by the UPND? To discuss this, my guest is Sean Tembo. He is president of the PEP. Good evening and welcome to the program.
Good evening, Costa, and a very good evening to viewers out there.
Let's just jump straight into this alternate budget that you released, last week. A 38-page, document dubbed "Exploiting Our Natural Resources to Pivot Zambia's Economic Turnaround." Is this not a little too late, President Tembo, in that submissions to the 2023 budget were welcomed earlier on in the year? Why is this alternate budget coming out rather in retrospect when the budget has already been presented on the floor of Parliament?
Well, there's a difference between budget submissions and an alternative budget. So for us, when the Ministry of Finance called for budget submissions, we did submit in terms of what we believed needed to be incorporated in the official budget. And as you are aware, the budget submissions, the deadline was end of August. If I'm not mistaken. So we did make a lot of submissions on a number of issues ranging from policy issues to taxation to the collection of non-tax revenue. And when we looked at the official budget, we noted that most of our submissions were not adopted. And so after the official budget is now released, that's when we developed the alternative budget. And as the name goes, it's an alternative to the official. If you do it before the official budget, it can't be an alternative. Yeah.
Yes, alternative. But then, should we be rendering this an academic exercise? If we want, like you say in part of your preamble in this, that you as a party identify that you've got two distinct roles as an opposition, rather to provide checks and balances, but also solutions to problems. In other developed economies, you've got shadow cabinets for many of these things, and such things are adoptable or rather implemented by sitting governments. Should we render this academic in our current setup?
Well, the decision of whether the alternative budget is adopted or not, whether in full or in part, is not really for ours as Patriots for Economic Progress. I think that's a decision by government. For us, we don't have any qualms whether they adopt the whole alternative budget, part of it, or they adopt it in full. We don't have any qualms because we do understand and appreciate the fact that in terms of the governance of our country, a mandate is given to one political party at a time. one president at a time. And for now, the people who have the mandate to govern this country is the UPND with Mr. Hakainde Hichilema as president. And so when we offer, proposals on how we can do things better as a nation, and he decides not to adopt those proposals, it's not for us to fight with him, really. It's his decision. He's playing the game at the moment, and when our time comes, we shall be playing the game, and others will be making submissions. We shall also be deciding in terms of which submissions to really adopt and which ones to put aside.
But then, what is the significance of conducting this? I mean, like you say, you boast of being the only consistent, political party doing this, other than the UPND themselves in 2004 with Anderson, Kambela Mazoka. What motivates then this if we can't see these alternative solutions being brought on board?
Well, I think that's a question which government should answer. When you talk about economic management, different people have different opinions. The current administration believes that it is okay to borrow $1.4 billion from the IMF, while we are losing, in excess of $3.2 billion in tax holidays. So it's a matter of opinion, really. At the end of the day, we shall see at the end of the 5 years whether the path which the UPND and Mr. Hakainde Hichilema had taken was the correct path, or whether the path that we are proposing is a better path. And of course, in terms of trying out our proposed solutions to economic challenges, the best way to really practically try those out is for the Zambian people to vote us into office, to make Sean Tembo their president, and then they'll be able to see that the things we have been advocating for since 2016 are things that are practical, are things that can turn around the economic fortunes of this country. But until and unless the Zambian people give us that mandate, our preparation of the alternative budget will remain good ideas just floating in the air, not to the benefit of the people.
Good ideas floating in the air, consistent from 2016. I don't know whether even the former ruling party in the PF adopted any of this. But I think this consistency shows that as a political party, you are deeply and critically thinking about the economic challenges of this country, and this is what basically the citizens have been asking for when they call for issue-based politics.
For me, Costa, personally, it pains me a lot to realize that we have this country we call Zambia with all the potential that we have in various sectors of the economy. Whether you talk about the agricultural sector, we have stable climate, we have very fertile soil. You talk about the tourism sector, we have, an abundance of natural resources, well-stocked national parks, very exotic wrecks. We even have the Victoria Falls to top it up. Whether you look at the mining sector, we have an abundance of base minerals, we have precious metals, we have gold at Kasenseri, which was fenced off when the UPND came into office by the Zambia National Service up to today. So we have all these, resources which can be exploited, which can be converted into actual wealth for the benefit of the Zambian people. And yet it's not done. When you go out there in the compounds, you go out there in the villages, you see the level and extent of poverty, you feel like crying if you really care about this country. So for me, I know that our country lags behind in a number of issues. We lag behind in terms of governance. We lag behind in terms of our legal justice system. But the issue which is very paramount to me is economic development.
I was just about to say, with the consistency from 2016, you seem to have started off on a good path of issue-based politics, alternate solutions like, this budget. You seem to have, veered from that. Are you falling into the usual below standard rhetoric politics that we see in Zambia? Some of your social media posts on Facebook sound a bit offensive and really losing the issues around what you put on paper. Why have you seemingly taken such a stance, especially on President Hichilema? People would say what you're doing in this alternate budget is very different from what you put up on your social posts.
Costa, like I told you at the beginning, there are two issues that we face as opposition. On one hand, we need to provide checks and balances, holding the government of the day accountable. And then on the other hand, we need to provide alternative solutions to national problems. Now, when you talk about providing checks and balances, when you speak as an opposition, when you're providing checks and balances, when you're pointing out what government has done wrongly, you need to use very strong language.
Are you not speaking strongly here?
Otherwise, the government will not pay attention. They will not pay attention. The idea is to speak so that the message reaches them and they pay attention and they possibly respond.
But do you need to be uncouth and disrespectful of the head of state?
It's not uncouth. It's not disrespectful. You know what has happened over the years, since, let me just say 1 year, ever since the UPND came into office. What has happened is that the UPND approach of doing politics is to, the UPND, even Hakainde Hichilema himself, as an opposition leader, he was a very naughty opposition leader. He was all over the place. You understand? He was not respecting the government of the day, so to say. Not that I'm going to disrespect him as well, but I just want to put it on record that Hakainde Hichilema was a very disrespectful opposition leader.
And so he's
the only opposition leader who went and broke the head of state on the convoy in Mongo there. You understand? We are not doing any of that. But what the UPND has done over the past year is to try and raise the standards of expectation from the opposition in terms of what their behavior should be, what they should say and what they shouldn't say. They want us in the opposition to be level-loaded in a manner whereby we treat Hakainde Hichilema as if he's a king, we don't challenge him in a manner that you're supposed to challenge him.
Is it wrong for you to challenge him in this manner that you have challenged him?
Yes.
And I'm happy to host you this evening because I've read through your alternate budget and I think this is what Zambia should be doing.
Yes.
Looking at your ideas rather than posts or tweets that will show uncouth or rhetoric or later on just land you in police cells. Is that do you think that makes you popular if you're screaming
Costa,
behind a police cell?
Costa, wherever you go in the world, politics is what it is. There are times when you talk things in a sober manner with the government of the day, and there are times when you shout at each other. You go to the U.S., you find Donald Trump is calling Joe Biden Sleepy Joe. Donald Trump is calling Hillary Clinton Crooked Hillary. You understand? So the thing about politics is that there are times when you engage in sober, discussions, sober debates, and the alternative budget that we develop from time to time is one such occasion. We should provide an opportunity between ourselves as opposition and the government to engage in sober debate about the development of this country. Once we finish that sober debate and we revert to our default settings, then we'll start shouting at each other on top of our voices. There's nothing wrong.
How do we take you seriously as leaders on very critical matters if Sean Tembo is commenting over the late delivery of fertilizer supplies, but is making a joke out of it?
Well, different people have got different approaches to issues.
So you're trying to demote Sean?
Costa, you find that our society is bedeviled with a lot of problems. When you meet an average person, you tell them your problems and they tell you theirs, you'll be like, well, I think mine are better. So everybody is, battling with their own problems, their own issues. So when you present your point, and that's my belief, that's the belief of my media team. When you present your point and you couch it in a manner that is, edible, in a manner that is not frightening, you understand? They are likely to get the point than if you are always upset and screaming, and even if the issues you're talking about are serious, very serious, if you are screaming when addressing the people, when you are talking on top of your voice, then people are likely to be, to not really embrace what you're trying to put across. But if you put it in an edible manner, in a manner that is, friendly and amiable and with some humor, my belief is that people are likely to embrace and get your point.
One of the things we're trying to rid of our politics is caterism, violence, and really raise the bar of the quality of our politics. You can talk about Sleepy Joe, Crooked Hillary, but these are things on the basis of issues. This, strategy of yours, of antagonism or the way you're packaging your message, is this the end game that you want to package yourself in a way where you make UPND cadres want to lynch you wherever they see you. It takes you to police cells. You feel then you're becoming a more popular and stronger political figure if you necessarily find yourself on the wrong side of the law?
First of all, I must say that having a different opinion is not illegal. And if you look at the UPND and the arrests that they have made, not only of me, but various other opposition leaders, you realize that they are failing to prosecute those cases. So they just take pleasure in arresting you, and they'll make sure they arrest you before a weekend. They'll detain you like they detained me for like 6 days without charging me. And then when they charge you, you go to court, they are nowhere to be seen at court. They don't have a docket at court. You know why? Because those are baseless cases. If they had tangible cases which are prosecutable, then they would go and prosecute at court.
What is the status of your...
I see that as mere intimidation.
What is the status of your case in which you were obviously arrested and charged? And as a rider to that, what is your comment regards the human rights record of this current administration 1 year down the line?
Well, our case, like I said, I was kidnapped. I was never arrested. I was kidnapped. Because when you are being arrested, I'm a former police officer myself. I know the procedure for arresting a suspect. You introduce yourselves, you identify yourselves as officers, and the person is detained, taken to a station. Then you do a warrant and caution, and then you effect an arrest. The whole process takes less than an hour. You understand? That's an arrest. For me, I was kidnapped by Zambia police officers, taken to, Woodlands police, dumped in the cells, and then left there, for 6 days. My relatives, my lawyers would go there. The officers there were saying, no, we are not dealing with this case. The people dealing with this case are from police headquarters. And the people from police headquarters were nowhere to be seen. You understand? So that's essentially a kidnapping. Eventually, when they managed to arrest me and charge me, we got police bond, and then we went to court. I went to court, I think, about 5 or 6 times. The docket was never there. So I told the prosecutors there to say, look, you've got my contact details, you know where I live. If you are ready with the docket, whenever that is going to be, give me a call. Then I'll come to court. You understand? So that is the status. And that is the same status with all the other political leaders who were arrested.
What have you finally been charged with?
I was charged with, what was I charged with? I've even forgotten. That was just a joke. It was a joke. It was a joke because that case doesn't carry any credibility. They were saying that, no, I was talking about Hakainde Hichilema because I said Barry. Who says Barry is Hakainde Hichilema? Hakainde Hichilema just borrowed that name in 2019. He borrowed that name from the street. And then he wants to have exclusive rights to the use of the name Barry. That is ridiculous. That is totally ridiculous. So that case can never go anywhere. That's the bottom line. It can never go anywhere because Hakainde Hichilema and Barry are not mutually exclusive. You understand? They are not mutually exclusive. I was using the word Barry when I was young, referring to my father. You understand? And my father is not Hakainde Hichilema. You understand? So these people like to intimidate, and they want to prescribe a certain code of conduct for you, the opposition. We are not going to be railroaded. We are not.
Are your freedoms and rights being violated in terms of freedom to associate, freedom, to assemble, freedom to express yourselves freely? Because this is the platform that the UPND used against the Patriotic Front. Is the political space much more freer, Mr. Sean Tembo?
For me, Costa, I'll tell you the truth. Me, I don't pay attention to their intimidation. Yeah. Sometimes I tell them to go to hell. Sorry to use that French. I'm not going to be intimidated. Even by their cadres or their police, I'm not going to be intimidated. But I've seen that other opposition leaders are intimidated. They stop their, activities. I saw one of the opposition leaders who was chased from a house in the Copper Belt because they were having lunch at that house. Such ridiculousness cannot happen to me, and I want to challenge them. If they want, let them come to my place and try to do that. I'll never, tolerate such nonsense because, the UPND themselves used to cry about abuse of the, state police. to intimidate the opposition. So now they are in charge of the police. They want to use the same police against us in the opposition. They can use that against other opposition leaders, but they can't use that against Sean Tembo. Me, I'll go and meet people where I want to meet people. I'll congregate. The other day, I was having my alternative budget there, and people converged there. My place is just about 100 meters or 300 meters from the police station. Police can't come to my place. You understand? Because I'm not breaking any law, and I'm not subject to that kind of intimidation. You
Do you think you're above the law?
Not above the law.
What makes Sean Tembo special?
Not above the law. I'm above intimidation by Hakainde Hichilema. Hakainde Hichilema cannot intimidate me. He can intimidate other people. He can't intimidate me.
Let's get into the nitty-gritties of this exploiting our natural resources to pivot Zambia's economic turnaround. Among the things you say, first of all, you claim that even the theme of the 2023 national budget as proposed by the current government for you does not exuberate confidence in terms of economic recovery, so you have an issue with the theming of the budget. But you talk about interesting aspects. Let's start around, first of all, taxation issues, because there you propose the reduction of VAT from 16 to 13%. You've proposed adjustments on corporate tax. You want a block taxation across board of 25%. You're talking about issues of the ratio between tax revenue to GDP. So many things. You're talking about an exemption threshold of 10,000 kwacha for payee, and many other issues. Yeah. Interestingly, also, you're trying to say the aspect of removing the non-deductibility was a mistake. We should rather be looking at mining turnover tax and so on. Let's start with your tax issue, alternatives.
So when you look at our tax system, first of all, I want to emphasize, Costa, that for a nation to fund its expenditure, we have expenditure as a nation. We need to buy medicines, we need to pay salaries for our police officers, our soldiers, and so on and so forth. So for a nation to fund its expenditure, you need to have an efficient and effective taxation system. But that taxation system should also be equitable. It must be equitable because you want to ensure that people pay according to their capacity. Those with a lot of money should pay a lot of tax. Those with a bit of money should pay a bit of tax. Those with little money or no money at all shouldn't pay tax because they don't have money. They can hardly feed themselves. So that should be the basis of a good taxation system. It should be equitable, in addition to being efficient and effective. So when you look at our taxation system in Zambia and you compare it to the taxation systems in the region, you realize that one of the key measures that is utilized to ascertain the effectiveness of a taxation system is the tax revenue to GDP ratio. What percentage of your GDP are you able to collect as tax revenue? So that's tax revenue to GDP ratio. And when you look at Zambia's tax revenue to GDP ratio, which was proposed in the official budget, you find that it's standing at about 17%. And when you look at the tax revenue to GDP ratios of other countries in the region, you find that South Africa, for instance, has 25%. Zimbabwe has about 23%. Botswana has about 26%. Namibia 26%. Even Malawi has about 24%. So we have the lowest tax revenue to GDP ratio. And when you look at the GDP of a country, you would equate that maybe to the size of a cow. And the tax revenue, you would equate it to the milk coming from the cow. Yeah. So you realize that we have a big cow, but we are not able to milk. We are not able to collect as much milk.
You as PEP are proposing a tax revenue to GDP ratio of 25% to be sort of in pari passu with what is happening in the region.
Average, yes.
But with the analogy you give, how do we milk a cow that is not being well fed or is hungry? In short, many Zambians are complaining of being heavily taxed. Some of us in business feel we are overly taxed.
The problem, Costa, is that, remember I said that taxation should be equitable. Yeah. Yes. So those with more money should pay more tax. Those with less money should pay less tax. If you look at our tax proposals, we are proposing that the payee threshold should be 10,000 kwacha. Anyone getting paid 10,000 kwacha and below should not pay tax. You understand? In other words, we are saying that those with little money, because when you look at the basic food basket, the JCTR basic food basket, is standing at about slightly above 9,000 kwacha. So 10,000 is the amount you need to feed a family of 6.
Obviously,
let me just finish.
I just want you to.
Let me just finish the point.
Let me just put a rider, because when you're proposing 10,000 kwacha as exempt threshold, or 0 to 10 is exempt, others will argue that that will be loss of revenue.
So let me make my point, if you allow me.
Yeah, because I want you to just also go further and explain how you cap that revenue that is going to be lost.
Yeah, you know, taxation issues are technical issues, so you need to give me time to be able to explain them. If you keep cutting me, people will not, you know, get the point that I'm trying to put across. So if you can just be patient a little bit, if you mind, if you don't mind, that is. So my point was that when you look at our taxation system here in Zambia, we have a taxation system whereby we heavily tax people who don't have the capacity to pay. And people who have the capacity to pay are not fully taxed. You understand? The question is, who has capacity to pay? Number one, the mines. The mines have the capacity to pay because copper prices are doing very well in the world market. They are making supernormal profits. So they have the capacity to pay. You get the point. And the president, Mr. Hakainde Hichilema, goes ahead to give them a tax holiday. How do you give the mines who are supposed to pay most of the tax a tax holiday? You can't do that. And then you come to the average person, you know, heavily tax a small business like yours. It doesn't make sense. Even when a person is bent in an accident, let's say you've got a wound on your forehead and they're trying to graft some skin to patch up where you've lost your skin there. They're going to look for where you have the most skin, isn't it? So they'll go to your behind because that's where there's the most skin. They'll get skin from there and put on your forehead. They are not going to get skin from your chin because there's no skin to get here. The same thing applies with taxation. You can't heavily tax people who don't have the capacity to pay. And yet people who have capacity to pay, the mines, are left untaxed. That's why when you look at our alternative budget, it's very clear. It's very simple, really. We are saying that the mines should pay a fair amount of tax. We are not saying they should be...
Can I pause the question, if you may allow me just there?
Just one more minute. Let me conclude this. We are not saying that the mines should be killed in terms of being taxed to death. No. We are simply saying that they should pay a fair share of tax. And the question then becomes, what's the fair share of tax that the mines are supposed to pay? It's supposed to be proportionate to their contribution to the mines, to the GDP. When you look at the contribution of the mines to the tax pool, when the mines were owned by ZCCM, you find that the mines economically to GDP, they were contributing about 22%. And then to the tax pool, they were contributing plus or minus 22%. So their contribution to the economy vis-a-vis their contribution to the tax pool were comparable. You understand? You fast forward to today, the mines are contributing an average of about 24% to GDP. You understand? But their contribution to the tax pool is 3%. So how can a sector contribute about 24% to the GDP and yet it only contributes about 3% to the total tax pool of the country? It doesn't make sense. So that is our argument.
My question is, where have we been getting it wrong all the time in terms of maximizing our resources, especially in the mining? Because this cry is not only from you as PEP. Levi Mwanawasa, rest in peace, tried with windfall tax and mineral royalty. And so when Ngandu Magande was minister, we've been having a flip-flop. And what resulted out of that is when you sit with mining companies, one of the reasons they give is that there's been inconsistency with Zambia's, tax policy and mining regime. I think the law has changed 15 times in the last 9 years, and they say that is instability, even when you compare with countries like the DRC, which is war-torn, but is making more tonnage output than we are. So, two questions, Sean. Why have we failed 56 years to get our taxation in the mining right? And what do you feel works better for the mine? You're proposing MTT. Break that down for us.
I'll start with the first question, Costa. The reason why our taxation system here in Zambia with regard to the mines has been chaotic, in my view, is because of corruption, high levels of corruption. You must understand that when we talk about taxing the mines, we are talking about billions of dollars. That's a lot of money, Costa. billions of dollars for an economy as small as ours. That's a lot of money. So what happens then is that the mines are able to buy their way through the setup, the political setup. You understand? They might not buy the president, but they'll buy the Minister of Finance or buy the Minister of Mines or buy the Minister of Commerce to advocate for them in cabinet. And that buying is easily done. They will simply ask the person to say, okay, can we open a numbered account, an offshore numbered account for you? It will not have your name, just an account number. You can draw anytime you want. They'll open an offshore account for that minister or even a president, you know. They'll open an offshore account for them. Then they'll wire maybe 40, 50, even $100 million and say, oh, this amount here, you can use it when you want. So as a party, they'll look at that amount, they'll say, we can use this during elections so that we can defend our incumbency. So they'll change the tax regime. If you ask me why the UPND have, this appetite to give tax holidays to the mines, I believe that, first of all, the mines started funding the UPND when they were still in opposition. And right now, it's a payback time for the UPND towards the mines.
Is this a compelling theory?
Question.
Is this a compelling theory with justification and evidence, or you're speculating?
That's my belief. I strongly believe.
But you don't have the facts.
I have the facts. That's why I believe.
Well, if you have facts, prove it. Why don't you lay facts on the table?
Well, if you want me to, how do you want me to? You want me to go and print the facts from my computer and bring them here, or you want to pause the program?
Well,
I go and bring the.
I was expecting that not even from this program, but if there's such compelling evidence that you're as the opposition to show us that this is what is happening, that our assets are being mortgaged.
Yeah. So for us, Costa, I'm sure you're fully aware, we are very active in all spheres, whether it's civil litigation against the government. Ever since the UPND came into office, we've taken them to court 3 times. The first one was to compel Hakainde Hichilema to declare his assets in the Concord. At that time, Hakainde Hichilema was just about 4 months in office. But we took it upon ourselves to take him to the Constitutional Court to compel him to declare his assets. Because if Hakainde doesn't declare his assets, which he has refused to do up to this point, then how are we going to hold him accountable? We can't hold him accountable. It means he can accumulate as much wealth as possible from wherever sources, illegal sources. The mines can wire as many millions, hundreds of millions of dollars into his offshore accounts. He will say, I already had this money before coming into office. So that first step of President Hakainde Hichilema refusing to declare his assets should raise alarms in the minds of the Zambian people, including yourself.
What about the argument that all of you as aspirants do declare that before the ECZ?
But ECZ refuses to make that information public. Yes. A number of people have gone to ECZ and said, can you give us a declaration for President Hakainde Hichilema? ECZ has refused. Even us, we have even sued ECZ. ECZ has refused.
Due to time,
let me answer the second question.
I want you to explain to us these proposals on MTT and how, in your view, it works better. And you're saying we lost out by removing the non-deductibility aspect of tax. Because this is what, I attended a mining India, but this is what the operators were crying for.
But those are the people who are getting taxed. So what do you expect? You want them to say, tax us more or make us pay the tax. They'll cry. Even when you give them a tax holiday, the way the president gave them a tax holiday, they'll still cry.
They said it's unlocking investments.
They'll use all sorts of excuses. No one wants to be taxed. No one wants to pay tax. That's the bottom line. But the bottom line is also that we need tax revenue for us to fund our main expenditures. We need tax revenue for us to buy fertilizer and farming inputs and deliver them on time. We need tax revenue for us to be able to buy medicines in hospitals. You understand? That is also the bottom line. So even if people are claiming to say, no, give us a tax holiday so that we can produce more copper, that's ridiculous. You produce more copper while paying your fair share of tax.
So how would your MTT work?
So there are 2 issues here, Costa. There's an issue of tax evasion by the mines, and there's an issue of bad policy by government by giving the mines tax holidays. So these are 2 distinct issues. With regard to the bad policy by the government of the day, where they have this appetite to give tax holidays to the mines in the false belief that that will increase production, that one, it's an attitude thing. They just, either we change the government and put a new and different government, such as my government, which will not have that appetite to give tax holidays to the mines, or you hope that President Hakainde Hichilema will have a change of heart along the way, and then he will begin to properly tax the mines. So that's a separate issue. Now, there's a second issue of tax evasion. That remaining little tax which the mines are supposed to pay, they dodge paying it. How do they dodge paying it? They dodge paying it through two ways. Transfer pricing on the sales part of it, where instead of selling the copper on the world market using the world market price, they sell to their subsidiary. So like you're moving copper from your front pocket to your back pocket, and they sell it at a very low price because they are selling it to their subsidiary, so that they transfer the profits to their subsidiary. And then in terms of the sales, you know, when doing a return, you declare your sales and your expenses and then the profit. So if your sales are low, it means that your profit will be very low, if not negative. So that's how they do it. So they don't pay corporate tax. They don't pay corporate tax.
You are proposing...
And let me just finish this point, if you don't mind. So what we are saying is that instead of fighting with the mines on corporate income tax, where they, you know, reduce their sales and inflate their costs, because when the machinery is being bought and brought in the country, they don't buy it directly from a third party. They buy it through a subsidiary, and that subsidiary then sells to the Zambian mine, and they inflate the cost of the machinery. You understand? So instead of fighting with the mines, with all that, you can simplify it by having a mineral turnover tax, whereby you tax them not on the profit, which they can manipulate at the bottom, but on the sales. And the sales not based on what they declare, no, based on the output multiplied by the international price of copper. You understand? So if they produce 1 million metric tons, you just look at, oh, what is the world price of copper on the London Metal Exchange? You say, okay, it was $9,000 per metric ton. You multiply by $9,000, then you get your 9 billion, and you tax a percentage of the sales.
How do you factor in the cost of production for the mines? Because obviously they'll need to account for that. But due to time, I also love the fact that you've tried to address the long-standing thorny issue of VAT returns with the mining companies. Let's all get down to what you're proposing.
So with regard to the issue of VAT for the mines, you know, this country is a very funny country because we are paying the mines so much money. You know, the net amount, when we look at what the mines pay to the treasury and what we pay to the mines in mining, you know, VAT refunds, the net effect is that we are almost paying the mines instead of them paying us. You understand? So the issue of value-added tax returns, you know, we have always advocated this even under previous governments to say, look, there's no need of making value-added tax zero-rated for the mines, because zero rating, you know, the principle of zero rating of exports is based on the belief that you want to promote exports. So when you zero rate your exports, you'll be promoting the local manufacturing, you know, industry, which will be able to export
there's no
more
value addition on our copper in any case.
Yes, those are raw materials. It's not manufactured goods. So why zero rate raw materials? Raw materials are supposed to be standard rated. If copper is standard rated, it means that the mines will be in a net payable position to the treasury. They will be paying VAT to the treasury. But because copper is zero rated, you know, they are in a net receivable position. We are the ones paying the mines. You understand? So my belief is that we need to change the policy and make copper and all other raw materials, whether it's timber, all other raw materials which are exported, they need to be standard rated.
Due to time, I'll ask you 3 tough questions, but I only give you 3 minutes in which to tackle them. Number one, you say in your alternate budget that you are not, you know, happy with the mode, the manner, the pace at which the Mopani and KCM impasse is being, you know, dealt with. You actually say, and I quote you, that a radical wrong decision rather than a correct long-winded decision is better for you. Number one, the issue of Mopani and KCM, because you say if we don't unlock this...
Actually, the court says an imperfect timely decision is better than a perfect delayed decision.
Exactly. So the impasse on the mines, because you believe this is key to unlocking, obviously, our economic potential and so on. But number two is the issue on FISP, the late delivery and fertilizer. You strongly believe that we do not need to import any fertilizer from Russia, Ukraine. NCZ is what needs to be recapitalized. And finally, there's this thorny or issue of discourse in public right now. I want to speak to you as an expert auditor yourself, this issue to do with Ministry of Defense and the private audit. So those three critical issues.
Yeah. So I'll start with
The mines.
The issue of the mines. Sorry, what was the question on the mines?
The impasse with Mopani and KCM.
Oh, KCM and Mopani, okay. So
how would you rather resort it?
When you look at that issue, the previous government, the PF government, took a position. On Mopani, they believed that government needed to purchase 100% shares from Glencore over a period of time. So they signed that purchase agreement. Okay, that was the position of the previous PF government. On KCM, they believed that KCM needed to be liquidated, and they pressed KCM on liquidation. You understand? And then UPND government came. They did not agree with the position taken by the previous government, which is well and good. But they are failing to chart the way forward on how they want to proceed. So they're just saying, no, we are not going to proceed with the previous decision of the previous government, but they are not providing direction in which way they want to go. So that creates uncertainty in the market. And it's been more than 15 months so far. And our argument is that they should take a position. They should take a position. Either they go ahead with the purchase agreement for Mopani from Glencore, or they terminate the agreement. They need to take a position. They cannot be in abeyance. The same applies with the KCM. They need to take a position. So that is our argument. 15 months is too long a time to be undecided as a government. Let them take a position. The markets might react to that position, but they'll get in line because the position has been taken. Right now, there's just uncertainty.
Fertilizer and late distribution.
Looking at fertilizer, first of all, I find it extremely regrettable, Costa, that we should be talking about such basic things like fertilizer distribution and failure to deliver on time. Because if the current government is failing to get that small routine task correctly, then what about the complex economic policies that they talk about in their budget, which they intend to implement? Only God knows if they can have the capacity to implement those complex economic policies, if they can do a routine basic task of delivering farming inputs on time. Because government knew that the rain season will come and farmers will need farming inputs. And when you look at the supply chain of fertilizer, like if you award contracts in November the way they did, those people would have to go to a supplier in Saudi Arabia or Ukraine or whatever it is, Russia, and place an order. And that supplier would have a list of other orders which they are fulfilling. Because fertilizer is not produced and kept in warehouses. They produce when you make an order and make a deposit. You understand? And by the time they finish with that other list and start producing for Zambia, when they produce for Zambia, that fertilizer has to be transported to the nearest seaport. From that seaport, put on a ship. It has to be shipped to the nearest port here, whether Dar es Salaam or Durban. From the port there, it has to be transported by road to Lusaka. From Lusaka, it needs to be taken to provincial centers. From provincial centers to the districts. It's something that will take 6 months to 8 months. It's not something that will happen in weeks or days. You understand? So how can government award fertilizer contracts in November for the current farming season? The president says he was busy auditing the system. That doesn't make sense to me. And the worst part about the president's explanation in Chipata a few days ago is that, yes, he admitted that they failed with FISIP this year. But he did not provide any direction in terms of how they are going to help the farmers, how they are going to mitigate the situation.
He also champions this move of delayment and his intervention of saving the country over $173 million.
That's ridiculous.
Let's conclude with the issue of the defense wings in the story you've been following as an expert auditor yourself.
Yes.
Is the government offside? Is it welcome?
Just to wrap up on the fertilizer issue, Costa, I made a point in the budget that we don't need to actually import any fertilizer because we have capacity at nitrogen chemicals. We just need to pump in working capital. Why doesn't government have appetite to recapitalize nitrogen chemicals so that we produce all the fertilizer we need locally? You understand? Because they want to give contracts to their UPND affiliates and surrogates, because that's a perfect way of siphoning money from the treasury. So it is about self-interest of Hakainde Hichilema and his UPND than the people, the villagers who are suffering out there. Coming to the issue of the audit, I'll follow this audit issue very closely, Costa, and the Zambian people out there. And the Minister of Finance issued a statement in Parliament sometime last week on this issue. And his excuse was that the Auditor General was busy. That is why they decided to subcontract to private audit firms. I must mention that, legally speaking, it is not illegal to subcontract, for the Auditor General to subcontract part of the work to any private audit firm. But the issue here is one of judgment. You know, when you look at the wings that needed to be audited, like the defense and security wings, Zambia Intelligence Services, for instance, those wings are sensitive wings. And the tradition in the past has been that when the Auditor General has limited resources and they need to subcontract, they will do the audits for the defense and security wings. And then the audits for parastatals like ZESCO, ZRA, what are the ones which would be subcontracted, because those are not sensitive. But traditionally, the Auditor General would use their limited capacity to perform audits of all the sensitive security wings. What has changed this time around is that, well and good, it's not the first time that the Auditor General is having limited capacity. The only difference is that they have decided to use their limited capacity to audit non-sensitive state institutions, whereas they are subcontracting, private firms to audit sensitive state institutions.
The minister says they're not touching on the military side; it's the operational side, things like supplying of, goods.
Costa, I'm a chartered accountant. I've been running an audit firm for the past 20 plus years. When you go to do an audit of procurement, for instance, if you go to Zambia Army and they say we procured 2,000 rifles, first of all, you need to do an asset verification of those rifles. You want to find out where are these rifles. No, these rifles were dispatched, some to Tagagan barracks, others to Arakan, others to what. You go to the armory and do a physical verification. You understand? And if they say we purchased 5,000 grenades, you need to do a verification. If they say we procured 10 fighter jets, you need to go and do a verification.
This is not what they're auditing.
So the bottom line is that you can do an audit without a verification. And you can't do a verification without physically seeing something to say, yes, those are rifles that have been purchased by Zambia Army. That is the basis of an audit.
What is your take as PEP on this issue? It's not illegal. Do you welcome it?
My take is that, of course, it's not illegal to subcontract some of the work to a private audit firm, but as a matter of judgment on the part of government, they should have done it the way previous governments have been doing it, whereby they subcontract less sensitive work, especially for parastatals. You subcontract to LATSA, NRFA, RDA. That has been the tradition. And then the Auditor General audits the defense wings, the security wings. That has been the tradition.
President Sean Tembo, thank you so much for talking to me this evening.
It's been a pleasure, Costa.
This has been Costa, my guest, PEP President Sean Tembo. We're discussing exploiting natural resources to pivot Zambia's economic turnaround, the alternative 2023 budget presented by the Patriots for Economic Progress. The news desk is up next at 7 p.m. Remember, the live World Cup game comes through at 21 hours only on Diamond TV.
Costa was brought to you by FQM Trident Limited, a subsidiary of First Quantum Minerals Limited.
This is Melvin, Hi, Michael.
And this is his house. Melvin always has a lot of people over. Friends, friends of friends, friends of friends of friends. Everybody loves Melvin. And you wonder why. What is